Learning to tune your guitar by ear is an essential skill for every guitarist to develop. You could play the most flawless, virtuosic, rhythmic performance. However, if your guitar is out of tune, everything is greatly diminished. So it's going to help you in everything that you do, and it's worth acquiring the skill, developing a system so that you can tune accurately and quickly. Yes, we have electronic tuners that we're all very grateful for these days, but one, they're not as accurate as you'll be able to tune with your ear once you've developed this skill properly. Two, we may not always have them handy, whether it be on the phone, metronome, or clipped onto the guitar somehow. And three, they're a little bit slow. You have to turn it on, wait for the battery to come up, and then tune and watch the little lights go back and forth. So if you need to tune quickly, perhaps even in the middle of a piece, you need to really develop that skill to tune with your ear accurately and quickly. So in this lesson, we're going to look at 5 different ways to tune the guitar by ear. Some of these approaches are more difficult and require a bit more practice, and some of them are easier, but they all have pros and cons. Some are more accurate, some are actually just not good ideas to do at all, but they're very commonplace in the guitar world. So we're going to look at 5 of the most common approaches, and then you can decide what you will use to have a tuning system, a little tuning ritual, so that you'll be in tune every time, and that will help make your music. Before we dive into the 5 different approaches, let me give you a few little quick tips and some terminology. First of all, when I say reference pitch, it means that I've tuned one string and I know that string is in tune. The most logical way to do this is with an electronic tuner, perhaps on your phone with a tuner, or tuning it to another instrument that's already in tune, like a piano. So a reference pitch would be a string that we've already tuned and that we know is in tune, and then we adjust the rest of the guitar to tune to that pitch. Tuning to an electronic tuner doesn't necessarily mean that the guitar will be in tune. You may have found that you've tuned the entire guitar and they all go green and line up at the middle, but when you play and check your tuning, it's still out of tune. This is because guitars are not perfect instruments. It really has a lot of little intricacies, and tuning itself is quite a complicated matter. So that's why your ear is always going to do a better job at tuning the guitar than your tuner will. When you are changing the tuning of the tuning pegs, I encourage you to move the tuning peg slowly and evenly, instead of moving it in fast, like half turns or full turns or quick turns. This is because if you move it too quickly, there might be some slippage here at the tuning peg, and also it's just more difficult to hear the accuracy with which you're tuning the string. As you are tuning a string and moving the tuning peg, it's good to keep playing that string so that you can hear the change in pitch as you move the tuning peg. If you only play it once, depending on your guitar, you may not actually hear the change in the pitch that's happening as you move the string. So what I encourage is to play it more than once so you can keep hearing the actual pitch of the string. It is important to know that some guitars do not have good intonation. That means it's not you, it's the guitar. Even strings can be a bit faulty and have bad intonation. So if you have some trouble tuning your instrument and you just can't seem to get it in tune, and perhaps you've taken it to a teacher or a colleague and they can't get it into tune, it might be your guitar that has the issue. Sometimes the frets need adjusting, or the string is a little bit bogus, or the placement of the nut or the bridge can have an effect on that too. So if you have a cheaper guitar, or perhaps just an old guitar that's seen through some weather changes, that could actually be the issue if you have continued tuning problems. Tuning can be affected by something as small as a temperature change between rooms. This is much more prevalent on nylon string guitars than it is on steel string guitars. Steel strings are a bit more stable, but know that temperature changes the strings quite dramatically in terms of tuning. So too do the strings age. If you've been playing on the strings quite a lot, it usually is a little harder to get the strings in tune the older they get. They get some dirt and muck caught up in the strings. So new strings are going to be more responsive and more reliable. Speaking of new strings, when you put on a new string, especially nylon strings for acoustic guitars, they flex and they're quite elastic. So you'll find them going, you'll put them on and tune it up to pitch, but you'll find it going constantly flat and you're having to tune it up. You have to do this for, well, it depends how much you play the guitar, but it could be for around a day or two before the strings really sit in tune. So all of that is to say that tuning is pretty constant technique that we need to use on the guitar. That's why it's so important that we develop a system that's reliable, accurate, and quick. The 5th fret approach to tuning is the most widely used and common approach to tuning the guitar. This requires you to play unison notes on adjacent strings so that you can tell whether one string is flat or sharp or in tune. For this, we need a reference pitch, and that's usually going to be the 6th string, E. So once we have that note, we got it from an electronic tuner or from a metronome or from a piano or another guitar, then that string needs to be adjusted and in tune. From there, we can go of a sequence of fretted notes, and we can play unison notes to make sure that each string is in tune. So the method goes like this. E, the 6th string, is in tune, so then we hold down the 5th fret on the A. That A is exactly the same pitch as the open 5th string. So if you play the open 5th string, then it should be the same note. If it's flat, we can hear that it's flat, and then we adjust the string so it's in tune. Then we cross to the 5th string and play the 5th fret on the 5th string. That note is D, and then the adjacent string, the 4th string, is also D, open. So we go through the same process. 5th fret, open, and we make sure that they're in tune. Same goes for the 4th string, that's a G. Then we play the 3rd string open and make sure that's in tune. The 3rd string is the exception to the rule. We hold down the 4th fret, and then we play the 2nd string open. Those are Bs. And then finally, on the 2nd string, we go back up to the 5th fret, and we play E's. E, E. So you'll see this diagram on the download that I provided. But this is the most common and widely used approach. The problems with this approach include the fact that, one, you have to usually take off your finger as you go to tune the string. What this does is that you don't have the reference pitch to start off from. So we've got the in tune A and then the 2nd A. And as soon as we go to tune the pegs, we have to lift up our hand to do that. There is a way around that, which is take your right hand and change the pitch with that. It's a little awkward, but it gets around that problem. The second problem, and probably the most important one with this tuning method, is the idea of the game telephone. If you ever played telephone, that's where you start off by saying a word or a phrase, and whispering it in someone's ear, and then you go around and each person whispers it in sequence, and by the end, usually it's a completely different word, completely different phrase. And so what can happen here is that if you tune the string, but you're slightly off with your tuning, that means that every subsequent string, because they're being used as reference pitches, starts to get more and more out of tune. So you can really chase yourself in circles using this method if you're not accurate. If you are accurate, unison notes are a great way to bring the guitar in tune, so you should be fine. But do know that if you're not accurate throughout the whole process, you might get to the final pair of E's, and then you try and compare that to your 6th string, and then you're out again. So it can be a frustrating process if you're not skillful at tuning by ear in the first place. Tuning by harmonics is a really nice way to tune, but not necessarily that accurate. So tuning by harmonics involves you playing a natural harmonic on one string on the 5th fret here on the 6th string, and then playing it on the 7th fret on the adjacent string. So here we have 5th fret harmonic, 6th string, and 7th fret harmonic on the 5th string. And then you follow along 5th string to 4th string, 4th string to 3rd string, and then you might use your 7th fret, 6th string to the open B string, and then 5th fret harmonic to the open 1st string. Once again, you have these on the download diagram. The problem with this is that the 7th fret harmonics are slightly out of tune with your fretted notes. So it's actually not the greatest way to tune in terms of accuracy. It will get you a general good rough tuning. However, the notes that you'll find on the harmonics of the 7th fret are just slightly out of tune. 5th fret should be fine, and the 12th fret should be fine as well because they're octaves. But on the 7th fret, they're not going to give you a reliable tuning base. The lovely thing about this is that you can hear the notes ringing over one another while you tune. So that makes it really easy to adjust and make sure that you're in tune. You can hear the waves, the sound waves having beats against each other, and then it's easy to hear whether they're in tune or not. So it's a very popular method, but it's not actually one I would recommend because you might tune the harmonics correctly, but then you play the fretted notes and they're slightly different. So that is harmonic tuning with the pros and cons. My favorite way to tune is to use one string as a reference pitch. This really could be a number of strings. I like to use the 5th string just because I used to have one of those old tuning forks and that was tuned to A440. So that's where I think of when I think about tuning reference pitches. So if we say we have the A string, that's our reference pitch, it's in tune. Then you can take notes of the other open strings and tune them accordingly. So for instance, if we play 2nd fret, we've got a B, so therefore we can play the B on the 2nd string and tune those. And then the D on the 5th fret, E, that would also work for the 6th string, and then the G. This method requires you to hear octaves though. That's one of the challenges of this method because that B is an octave lower than the 2nd string open, whereas the D is a unison, easier to hear. So that's one of the challenges of this method. Another is that the G, depending on the pressure you put on your finger, can slightly get out of tune sometimes. So you could, just for the G string on here, use your 6th string G to tune the guitar. The thing I love about this approach is that you're using one reference pitch and you don't get that telephone effect that we get with the 5th fret approach. So your reference pitch stays constant and therefore you just have to be accurate with each string as you tune them. You could potentially do this with other reference pitches. So you could take the 1st string, for instance, open, and then find all the E's. So there's a unison on the 5th fret, 2nd string. There's a unison on the 3rd string, 9th fret. There's a unison on the 4th string, 14th fret. And then we can get the octave note here. And then we can get 2 octaves with the 6th and 1st string together. So this is an approach that uses one constant reference pitch and therefore really helps with accuracy in tuning. When you tune to a chord, you're actually tuning the guitar in a slightly different way than equal temperament. You're doing something called mean tuning, and you're really hearing a chord based on the thirds that are in that chord or other intervals. The problem with this is that you might get one chord in tune, but another chord played on the guitar will be out of tune. And this is a problem that people faced in music many hundreds of years ago, and that's why they developed equal temperament, hence the well-tempered clavier, one of the famous experimental pieces that took advantage of this new technology that was equal temperament. So you can perhaps, if you're playing in, for instance, Romanza, it's in E minor and E major. So it's very much centered around those keys. So you might want to check an E minor chord before you start hearing the E's and B's. You can also put the 3rd string G in there, just to make sure. That's, I think, a good way to approach if you've tuned with another system and you're about to play in the key of E minor. I do like to check with a chord of the home key of where I'm about to play. However, if you really try and tune the entire guitar just to one chord, you're really going to put yourself in a position where other chords will be out of tune, other key areas. So that's something to keep in mind. However, it is a nice way to check just before you play a particular piece. Another method that's very accurate and similar to just using a single reference pitch is to use octaves. Now we get octaves with certain types of fingerings around the guitar. And it's nice because we get to hear the two pitches are going to be very useful for us are unisons and octaves. And so those octaves are very clear about whether a pitch is in tune or not. One of the issues that crops up with using octaves is that when we fret notes, we can actually distort the pitch a little bit, whether we're pulling on the string, how much weight we're putting onto the fret as we're holding the string down. So up here, we could actually be distorting the pitch a little bit just by the way we're holding down the note. So that can happen sometimes. We can change the tuning just with the strength of our fingers. So that can be a little bit of a downfall with this, but if you're careful about a nice even approach to putting down your fingers on the frets, then you're going to get a very nice way of checking the tuning with octaves. So for instance, if we had, again, the reference pitch being A, then we could have octaves here on E's, and there's your third string. And all these different octaves around the guitar are going to compare not just adjacent strings, but strings that are further apart. So sixth and second, or fifth and third, or third and first. So octaves is a nice way to kind of double check what you're going to be doing, double check whether your guitar is in tune after you've gone through another system. Another add to this is doing fifths. So you could have, for instance, D, A, D, and A. This is a good rough guide as well, and it's really easy to hear whether the notes are in tune or not. Or you could use E's and B's. It's a nice way as well to hear just the whole guitar resonate, and then if something's off, you can pick it up with your ear and then fine tune again. So that's a pretty extensive look at different tuning techniques, but you can see that the reference pitch approach is really probably the one I would recommend the most because it's accurate, it's quick, and it's consistent. It may not be the easiest because we have to hear octaves rather than unison notes, but I think it really would be a really great way to go. And then we can fine tune with playing chords or octaves around the fretboard just to check in with things. So if you've been using the fifth fret approach for a long time, that's fine if it actually works well for you, but you might give a try to using a reference pitch, a reference string rather, so that you can be really accurate with your tuning. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. I hope you found it useful. If you'd like to download the worksheet that goes along with this lesson, it will give you a quick guide to remember some of the techniques we went through. Classical Guitar Corner Academy is an online school that I run for classical guitar. We take guitarists from the very beginning all the way through to advanced stages and advanced pieces. We have thousands of guitarists from all over the world that work through this curriculum and multiple teachers throughout the world too. So if you'd like to find out more about Classical Guitar Corner, please visit classicalguitarcorner.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.